Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I am Lilly Browning. I work for Hernando County Utilities. I am with Florida Friendly Landscaping here in Hernando County. I have Karen Mojica today with me. She is also with Hernando County with mosquito control, and she's going to jump in the middle of this program when we start talking about some of the water issues when we're attracting wildlife. I want you to attract wildlife. There's one particular type of wildlife Karen would rather you not attract. So therefore, we're going to discuss that. We're going to talk about creating a winter wildlife oasis today. Here again are the 9 principles of Florida friendly landscaping. I show these to you every time because that is my program. That's what, that is what Florida Friendly Landscaping is all about, following all of these 9 principles in our yards. We're going to cover number 5 pretty exclusively today, attracting wildlife, but also it's going to work in number 6, manage yard pests responsibly, recycling, all that. These all pretty much work together. Here is my email, and I'll show it to you at the end. If you would like a PDF copy of this, please email me. I sometimes can get a hold of the chat to see if you're asking for it, but remember this is recorded, so you might not want your email out there recorded as well. So just email me and say, I'd like a PDF copy of today's program. So because we're giving you a lot of information, it's not all inclusive by any means, but we're going to get you started and give you some good resources. My email is Lillyb, Lilly, 2 L's in the middle, B @hernandocounty.us. And there is my phone number down below as well. We're going to get started. What do animals need? We want to invite more and more wildlife to our yard, because what has happened is, by us existing from the time we were born, basically we've displaced some kind of wildlife somewhere so we could have our own food, cover, water, and space. So we need to give a little bit back. But all animals, including us, we all need all these things, and that becomes what is known as our habitat. So I live in an area here in Hernando County that is building up again. I can sit here working from home and hear the hammers all day long, hear all the construction activity going on. But what I noticed what happens is, right now I have a lot of woods around me. I don't know how long that's going to last because, we have a building boom going on at the moment. And what I noticed what happens is they totally clear cut, just take a lot and wipe everything out and try to start all over again. And what happens is, we don't put back the natural native stuff that was there. We wipe everything out. We replace it with a non-native turf mostly, and then all these other non-native plants. So, and then we wonder, why can't we attract any birds or bees or butterflies to our yard? And meanwhile, we're also pouring chemicals on it. So we're just going to talk about ways that we can overcome that and make our place more welcoming for the guests that we want to come. Okay. As I mentioned, now lawns, the number 1 principle of Florida Friendly Landscaping is right plant, right place. And it can be the right plant in the right place. But the problem is what we have done as a culture is just relied on lawns to be our yard. That's it. It's easy. It's simple. You throw it down, you mow it. And it has, good qualities to it. It does It's a plant. It creates oxygen. Um, it helps reduce temperature, helps reduce noise pollution, helps reduce erosion. It has its good qualities. But when we rely too much on our lawn, we become too lawn dependent, thinking that's the way to have a nice yard. Well, if we're trying to attract wildlife, that's not the way to have a nice yard, because that's just a big open field, which would be a zone of terror. I call that a zone of terror. Not only is it useless and sterile as far as any kind of food or much shelter, I mean, insects can shelter in there, it's also, they're just wide open to any of their prey. There's no hiding places there. So one of the things we can do to make our yards more wildlife friendly is to limit the lawn, create more spaces that they're comfortable with. And we can do that by increasing the vertical layering of the plants that we have. Plant diversity is the key. Different types of plants. If you're out in the woods, you don't go out into a wooded area and see 3 types of plants. You see many types of plants. So that's what we're trying to replicate. Also, the vertical layering that I'm talking about is different sizes, different heights, different widths, different shapes of plants, so that all sorts of different critters can find hiding places and shelter and food and all these wonderful things. Now, one of the best ways that you can attract any type of wildlife is to plant native plants. I'm not saying you have to go 100% native. If you do, that's fantastic. That's great. You don't have to go 100% native, but the more native plants you have, the more wildlife you're going to attract. If you think about it, what was here before we were? Native plants, and of course, the native animals, and they, developed together. So everything made sense. So the more natives you have, the more wildlife you're bound to attract. Non-natives can attract wildlife too. I'm not saying they don't, but a lot of times what happens is some of the plants that we have been so hybridized to look nice that the insects and the birds and the butterflies don't even recognize them as plants. It's like an inert object to them. So the more you go back to the origins, the more likely you are to attract wildlife. Now, when I say manage weeds, I'm going to have a caveat here, and I have a lot of classes about this. I even have a class you can see a recording of called, weeds or wildflowers, or what are they? A lot of what people have been trained to consider as weeds, I probably consider a wildflower, like this Spanish needle, or this Biden's alba. That's the man who originally named the plant many years ago. Anyway, and alba always means white. Yes, these are also beggar ticks, and especially this time of year, you brunch against them, you're going to get all those little sticks and stuff all over you. So if you have them in an area of your yard that you're not going to brush against, or your animals aren't, your pets aren't going to brush up against, oh my gosh, the insects and the pollinators that flock to this weed. It's growing out in my front bed. I'm probably going to take it out right soon because it's not looking great anymore. But I have a love-hate relationship with it. I love, 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 love all the pollinators it attracts, but it does get kind of aggressive. So I've learned to deal with the aggressiveness of it simply because of the great amount of pollinators it does attract. Now, when I talk about weeds, I'm talking about native wildflowers that we kind of turn our nose up at, that we need to look at in a different light. here in Florida, since we live in basically a greenhouse, we're very, very susceptible to having invasive exotic plants. Those are not the kind of weeds that you want to keep around. And some of them attract wildlife. I'm not going to tell you this lantana in the middle doesn't attract butterflies like crazy, but you have to weigh out, you know, what's good and bad about the situation. This lantana also then gets into wooded areas and crowds out the native plants that should be there. So in the long run, all of the critters that need the plants that are native will be affected if it ends up being a monoculture of just one type of invasive plant. Same thing can be said on the top left corner of Brazilian pepper. That's considered a noxious weed that here in Hernando County you're not even allowed to have it in your yard. If you do, you'll get a notice asking you to remove it. But beekeepers love it because honeybees love it. So beekeepers love it because it makes great honey. So, but what we're talking about today is trying to keep the balance of nature in check and looking at the whole wide picture. And if you are interested in learning more about invasive exotic plants, check out the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants at the University of Florida. Check out their website. You will see you'll be shocked how many tons of invasive plants we have out there. Now, here's the thing. If you want birds, if you're inviting someone to your house, don't you generally feed them? And okay, you're thinking of running out and buying some seeds, but that's not the only thing. If you want birds, a lot of them like insects. So you have to tolerate the insects in order to invite the birds over. Those insects are, of course, are not going to live in an area that has been sprayed with pesticides. Butterflies really aren't. Butterflies are extremely sensitive to pesticides. So you have to decide what is it that you want to do. Do you want this yard that's always sprayed with pesticides, or do you want these critters to be able to come in? Now what I do, I mean, the only pesticide I ever use at all is some fire ant killer, and I spot treat where the fire ants are. I don't broadcast spray all over my entire yard. And that is a Florida friendly principle. Where you have a problem, identify the problem, find out if it is a problem, and then find out the proper product that will take care of that problem. So generally what happens is I end up playing fire ant chess with my neighbor. We just move the fire ants from one yard to the other, but I use like a bait type granule for those. It's the only kind of pesticides you're going to find in my yard. Let's talk a little bit about bees. Bees are great pollinators. And when we think of bees, what's the first thing that you see in your head? When you hear the word bee, what do you see in your head? You see a honeybee, don't you? And we love honeybees. Honeybees are our friends. But guess what? Honeybees are not native, not only to Florida, they're not native to the Americas. There's a reason they're called European honeybees, because the Europeans brought them over because they wanted to start crops. And, you know, I guess they thought we didn't have bees or something. And now there's nothing wrong with the honeybees. They're our friends. They're fantastic. But just remember, there are other bees out there who are just as important. Even though they don't create honey, they are pollinators. So they're very, very important, such as sweat bees. Sweat bees are so tiny, so tiny. That's a pretty small flower that's a picture of. They couldn't possibly sting you, but they're fantastic pollinators. There's leafcutter and mason bees. Trying to move this. I'm watching the panel as well. Bumbles, cuckoos, longhorned bees, mining bees, plasterer bees, and melitid bees. these are basic groupings of these bees. So within each type, like if, there are different types of mining bees, different types of plasterer bees. This is basically just, really clumping them there. So there's lots of wonderful native bees out there. So we could have them in our yard and may not really even know it. But they're not the only pollinators out there in our yard. Of course, butterflies are pollinators. Moths are too. Beetles can be pollinators. Flies, some hoverflies that often gets confused with a bee. We were discussing that last week in our program with Frank Galdo. Wasps, and I know people who like to breed and rear butterflies, especially monarchs, get very upset about the wasps. And I'm kind of going to discuss that as we go along. The circle of life, you have to accept how nature is, and wasps definitely have their part in nature too. They are great. They're great pest control for us with other types of pests that may eat some of our desirable plants. These wasps, they'll go after butterfly caterpillars, but they will go after caterpillars that we don't want as well. So it's all kind of balanced there. Bats are pollinators, certainly birds, even ants are known pollinators. And there's two good things that our friends, the mosquitoes, do for us. And I'll let Karen talk about it in a little bit. But the two good things mosquitoes do for us is they are a food source for a lot of the critters that we do want, like the bats. And they are pollinators. So, we're never going to get rid of them completely. So at least we know they're doing something kind of good out there as well. But let's talk about some of these bees. The honeybees that I discussed, if you're trying to attract them, they prefer yellow, white, blue, and purple flowers. Did you know that they can't see red? I didn't know that until I was studying this. It doesn't mean like you won't see a bumblebee on a big red flower, but that is more the nectar that attracted them there. They prefer daisy-like flowers with broad petals to land on, or just land right in the middle of the flower there, like this bee that we see down in the corner. Our native bees, there are lots of flowers with nectar and things that they're attracted to, native ones. And they also happen to like fruiting trees. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to have, an orange tree or something like that. Berries, wax myrtles, and we're going to cover a lot of those as well. Here's something interesting that was kind of getting started before COVID came along. The county extension office was having classes, maybe they'll start it up again, where they were building these pollinator hotels. Teresa, who is there, she's fantastic. She created these ones in particular, these pollinator hotels. And just so you know, because she is so wonderful, she now has a new title. She's the Natural Resources Program Assistant there at County Extension instead of just secretary, because she does so much, like build these pollinator hotels, and she really increases her knowledge every day, and she's fantastic to talk to. Oh, and she's a beekeeper. So I will show you Extension's phone number in a little bit, and if you want to talk about honeybees, she's the one to talk to. Just ask for Teresa. She'll probably answer the phone. And as I said, at one time, they were making these pollinator hotels. You could call Teresa and ask, hey, how can I build one? If you're interested in these. I wouldn't hang them where the grandkids play. No, I wouldn't hang them where the grandkids play. And, but, put them in an area where you can attract these leafcutter bees, carpenter bees, orchard mason bees, potter wasps, and red and black mason wasps. They love these little tubes to be able to, they like their cavity kind of nesters. Now let's talk about bringing some birds into our yard, because that's, one of the best parts of living in Florida are the multitude of birds that we get to see all year long. Here's something, if you're in an area where you're allowed to do this, I would suggest keeping a brush pile around. So there you go, gentlemen who are listening. Tell your wife it's okay. Lilly said I can leave that there. I don't have to clean that up. Of course, unless you're in a deed restricted community that has, rules about that. Also, if you have a lot of land, I know Karen's going to be looking for a lot of land at some point soon. And you have an old dead tree, we call that a snag. And if it's not going to fall on anything, any building or anything of importance, keep it. I mean, you look at this, you see all those holes in that snag, that's from woodpeckers or sapsuckers. And then also living in there are all kinds of insects. It's a condominium for wildlife, lizards, all kind of things. So when you drive past pastures and you see these old dead snags, and you might think, oh, lazy rancher. Could be, but it's turning out well, because that's actually a fantastic home for wildlife. And the brush piles, I have several brush piles out in my natural area. I mean, lizards, birds, insects, all kind of wonderful things. Squirrels, they love it. Oh yeah, yes, yeah, snakes. You're in Florida. Snakes, I mean, I'm not going to say I don't scream and run the other way, but so do they. And then we go about our business, and I don't let them bother me. All righty. I'll let Karen talk in a second, but all living things need water. So if you want to attract the wildlife, you should have some type of water source in your yard. And I'll let Karen jump in and talk about how we can do that responsibly. Okay,
all
Karen.
Right. Thank you, Lilly. My name is Karen. I work here in mosquito control for Hernando County. We are a year-round department. We have a crew that are out there every day helping to keep our county safe from the diseases that the mosquitoes carry. I wanted to touch base real quick too, Lilly. You had mentioned before how with your insect control you spot treat, and we're kind of on that same approach here as well. Yes. We do get a lot of questions where people ask us when we're going to send the truck and when we're scheduled to send the truck. And we don't schedule the truck to go out and spray. We do that on an as needed basis. Our first attempt, and if you should call in for any, if you're having a mosquito problem and you call in, I'll answer your call. And the first thing I'll let you know is that we will come out and our guys will do a walk around the property. They'll do your whole area, see where those mosquitoes are breeding. Because if it's breeding in a catch basin or say there's a tire in the woods, it's best that we take that breeding spot and we just treat that spot. That will in turn stop the problem. If the truck went out every time there were mosquito issues, the truck would only knock down the ones that have already hatched, and that breeding spot still remains. So it hasn't really cured the problem. So plus, we don't like to just go out and spray. We are monitored by the state, and like I said, that is our last resort. So if you should ever call in, we'll come out, we'll walk around. It doesn't necessarily have to be something you left or even in your own yard. It could be a neighbor, it could be a catch basin, it could be a tree hole. But our guys are really friendly and they'll be more than happy to go out and identify that for you. As far as having ponds and bird baths and stuff, that's wonderful. We always encourage. We do have mosquito fish. We breed them here on site. So if you are going to have a small pond, some people use them in their animal troughs on the farms. If it's a big enough animal trough, those fish will swim down while the animals drink from it. Same thing as if it was a shallow lake, they know how to escape. They're pretty quick. They're just 1 inch size small fish. So we will come out at no charge, and we'll just bring however many are needed to live in the size that you're needing it for. And birds do eat them, so they will disappear. Turtles, so they will disappear over time. If you need a replenishment, it is not a problem. We have our breeding tanks, and we'll be more than happy to bring them out for you. Our guys rotate throughout the whole county, so we are always in your area at some point of the day. If you're going to do a bird bath, that's wonderful too. Just try to flush it and brush it once a week. The
Yes.
mosquitoes know those. They'll leave those eggs on the edge of the water there, waiting for you to fill it, and then they hatch into the larvae. You ever see little wigglers in there? Those are mosquito larvae. Dump them out. You don't want to see those there. They will hatch and be a nuisance for you. And I don't want to take too much time, Lily. I don't know if you're
Okay.
ready. And if you have any
Yeah.
questions, just type it in the chat and I'll be more than happy to answer it for you.
The mosquito fish, gambusa, is that what they are? There we go. You're just bringing more wildlife. And as she says, the birds do eat them. So again, that's all part of the circle of life, but they eat and they breed. They breed like crazy.
Yes.
And they eat mosquito larvae for you. That's their purpose. And the mosquito control will bring them to you for free. Now, in this situation, you'd want them in the pond, not in that tiny little bird bath. Moving water is always great because, you know, the mosquitoes can't attach to the moving water. But so if you want a bird bath and I'm just not going to go out there and dump that once a week and scrub it, then reconsider having a bird bath. Otherwise, you're going to be attracting the kind of critters we don't want to be attracting. Also, with birds, there are various types of bird houses that do work. Different birds have different requirements. Now, those butterfly houses, those butterfly boxes, they have been proven not to be very effective. But there's all different types of bird houses that you can get. And sometimes you have to wait a while. Sometimes it takes a while for word to get around that your hotel is open for the public. Also, as I said before, if you're going around killing all the insects in your yard, then you're not providing the food for a lot of the birds that you want in the yard. So a lot of the plants that we're going to show you, some of them actually just attract the insects. And that's what attracts, it's the whole food chain there. So you can't have an insect-free yard and have the other pretty wildlife that you want as well. It all works together. And you can provide seed. There's nothing really wrong with that. If you want to have feeders in a place that you specifically want to attract the birds so that you can enjoy them, there's nothing wrong with that. But I would suggest don't stop there. Make your whole yard a welcome place. And you do that not by necessarily having to run to the store and buy all the seed all the time. It's the plants that you plant with the different fruiting, things that they like. It's the leaving the insects there. It's letting the yard be a little messy. And we're going to get into that a little bit as well. From what I have heard from birders, though, the only really type of seed that they're not just going to throw on the ground are these, the hulled sunflower seeds and the fine cracked corn for particular species. But overall, the small black oil type sunflower seeds and the millet give the most for your bird feeding dollar. So, and a lot of people who want to attract birds have issues with squirrels. Let's just put it that way. I watch them get like squirrels. And I understand the bird feed is expensive and you don't want the squirrels there taking it all. But the way I'm looking at it is find ways to make a bigger table instead of a wall, because the squirrels are there. They're part of nature as well. That's just my way of looking at it. You might have differing opinions on that. Karen, I think we'll go ahead and let people in till about 10:45 or so. Here's different types of feeders, and this ground feeder is great for like sandhill cranes. But also maybe, go ahead and feed the squirrels, and maybe they won't be bothering trying to climb up everything to get to the bird feeders as well. Isn't this one beautiful? I got this one from this photography, Nature Boy Photography, Paul Weller. That's a painted bunting, isn't he beautiful? But what we're supposed to be looking at in this picture is the fruit that we can leave. This is our native beautyberry. It's interesting that Paul got this picture because usually the birds leave these beautyberries alone till they're pretty much black. We could eat these beautyberries. They're all berrying all over the place right now. They're just not all that sweet. So what the birds do is wait until they turn into like beautyberry raisins. The sugar content is higher. But this is a very easy plant to have in your yard, is this beautyberry. And we're going to discuss this painted bunting in a little bit as well. Now, I discussed squirrels. But we have birds of prey around here as well. So again, it's providing that food. It's part of the circle of life. Sometimes small critters are going to be eaten by bigger critters. That is part of having a wildlife yard. It might not make you happy, but that is part of the circle of life. So we have to accept those things as well. That being said, when I say that, I mean as far as nature goes. I don't mean allowing our pets who are not quite native species to disseminate our wildlife yard. So if you have a dog that just was really into hunting, bred to be into hunting, I would watch him closely while you're out there with him. Make sure you're out there with him, seeing what he's doing. Now, cats, people tell me my cat is so fat and so lazy. I don't worry about them out there catching things. Well, when the real truth is, cats hunt because cats hunt, not because they're hungry. Maybe a little bit because they're bored, but mostly because cats hunt. So, also, where I live in the Royal Highlands, it's dangerous for cats to be outside because they will be prey as well as predator. They will be prey to the coyotes. So if you have a cat and you want a wildlife friendly yard, it is best to keep the cat inside. And if you have an exotic pet, I'm sure the type of people who are here listening today are not the type who are going to release exotic pets into the wild. That just creates havoc all over the place. Look at the Everglades and the pythons and the iguanas in South Florida and all types of issues. That's just not a good idea at all. So let's restore the balance of nature and not let exotic pets out in the nature. Here's not an extensive a list of some of the snowbirds, and by them I mean actual birds, that you're going to find here in Central Florida, that you have the possibility of finding here in Central Florida in your yard. Cardinals, almost a given. They're pretty much going to be there. The blue jays, the American goldfinches, titmice are very common, as well are black-capped chickadees. They seem to hang out like together, the same feeders. Thrushes, woodpeckers. You will be lucky enough to see a pileated woodpecker from time to time. We have 3 types of hummingbirds in Florida. The other 2 mostly stay in the panhandle. So if you see a hummingbird, there's a 99.9% chance it's going to be a ruby-throated hummingbird. We have hawks. If it's breeding time, you do have to be kind of careful. You might want to wear a hat or something out there, because if they believe you're in their way, they will swoop down on you. thrashers, Carolina bluebirds, mourning doves, robins. I don't know what it is about robins, but every New Year's Day, my yard is packed with dozens of robins. I mean, obviously they're eating insects that are in my yard, but why on New Year's Day, I really don't know. So, but they're there every New Year's Day and sometimes other days in the winter too. But that's my New Year's gift every year is a whole yard full of robins, plus all these other type of birds in the second column. Here's our friend again, that painted bunting. Because I want to challenge you. He's not that often seen here in Hernando County, but he has been. And usually in more of a wooded area. I think I've heard of Chinsegat Conservation Center is where I knew someone who spotted one. I belong to several photography Facebook groups, and they seem to see them a lot, like in Southeast Florida, although my sister's a person snowbird in Port St. Lucie. She claims she hasn't seen one, but a lot of photos show up of them down in that area. So I'm going to challenge you, see if you can find a painted bunting. Now's the time to find him looking like this. This is his going to town and meeting the ladies outfit. That is why he's looking so good right now. He's ready to go out on the town and meet some ladies. Doesn't look like this all the time. That would be too dangerous. You know, predators could spot him very easily. So this is his going out clubbing outfit. And that's why he's so pretty. So if you find one, email me a picture. I'd love to see him. Now, you notice I haven't talked that much about butterflies. And why is that? Well, because it's winter. And you know, we can have some butterflies, but let me start by telling, let's talk specifically about monarchs. And if you have this type of milkweed, because you love to have monarchs, this is Asclepias cursavica. It's also called tropical milkweed. It is what you are likely to find in a big box store. Now, this particular milkweed is not native to here. Our native milkweeds respond to daylight hours and go down and don't flower during the winter months, because that's just how nature all works together. It doesn't want the monarchs hanging around here because they could freeze. It wants them to continue their journey further south or even onto Mexico. And yes, I know it freezes in Mexico, but when we see all those pictures of those billions and billions and billions of monarchs all together, a bunch of them are going to freeze. But we don't want to be, you know, that's their final destination. That's all part of nature. That's all working together. But there is another issue aside from the freezes. Well, two other issues. If you rear the monarchs now and you let them out on a beautiful sunny day in January, well, it was a pretty day. They hatched, I let them out. What are they going to nectar on? Not much out there blooming. So we would like you to, if you have this tropical milkweed, to cut it back now. If you haven't done so right after this program, go out and cut it back November through mid-March. So you're not attracting them to be here where they could freeze. Another issue that occurs is there's a parasite that monarchs carry around naturally on their wings. I believe it's called OI. That's the shortened version. They do have it naturally on their wings, and it doesn't hurt the butterflies, but it, in enough abundance, it kills the caterpillars. So what we have here are these milkweeds that are tricking the monarchs into hanging around longer than they should, and they're not social distancing. We've learned about social distancing, haven't we? So we have bigger groups of monarchs hanging around because they're tricked by these milkweeds that shouldn't be up and blooming now, and there's more of them, and so that parasite falls off of their wings, affects the caterpillars, and kills them. So that is another reason. And I think I don't know, I'm not a monarch expert, but what I'm thinking is, sure, when they all gather together by the billions in Mexico, and maybe like the top ones do freeze when it gets freezing weather, that also controls that parasite. So anyway, it's just not meant to happen here. It's meant to happen the way nature intended. So let's not confuse nature. The other things with as far as the other butterflies go, the best thing I can tell you again is to go back to those native plants. The native plants react to cooler weather, or they react to the daylight hours. So they know when to bloom and when not to bloom. And therefore, the native butterflies that would be attracted to them are going to respond appropriately to whether they're around or not. That's just the best way to handle that. And when I say here, what you can do for butterflies right now is be messy. This is happening a lot up north. They always, in the fall, they have campaigns where they're telling people not to rake up their leaves, because a lot of caterpillars, they're growing, they're hiding, they're pupating under those leaves. So same thing happens here. What does the forest look like? Is the forest a very clean, neat place? No, it's not. And the reason is because it's providing shelter for various things, including those caterpillars. So don't get overly neat, have some leaf litter in various places to allow those butterflies to overwinter. There you go. We want you to cut that as soon as this is done. Go out and trim back that milkweed. Don't let it grow back till mid-March when the danger of frost is over. Now let's talk about the different types of vines and plants and shrubs and all that will be providing flowers and fruits and all that for your pollinators right now, this time of year. This big thing going on, Frank Galdo in Pasco County, he's in love with this climbing aster. I just bought some. I still need to plant it. I bought some from a native plant nursery. Frank insists that the flowers smell like baking sugar cookies when you get enough of them. So great vine to get you in a holiday mood as well. But they're also going to be blooming profusely through the winter. So wonderful time a wonderful vine to have in the winter. Now, I learned some things because some things I researched said, this Dutchman's pipe here, pipe vine, that's going to attract this beautiful swallowtail butterfly. So, but then I was reading other things, such as from the Center of Aquatic and Invasive Plants, that different types of Dutchman's pipe vine, the ones I have mentioned here, these two Latin names are what you should avoid because they are actually invasive exotics. They're not the native vine. It's of interest to me because I have noticed, was talking on the phone, looking out the window, and I was like, what is that? This vine with these funky flowers growing all over my crepe myrtle. And in the back of my mind, something was telling me Dutchman's pipe vine. So it's, things that you don't know that you know. But I'm thinking, where in the world did it come from? And then when I was researching this, I was like, oh, cool, it's native. And I should know better than that. Because it's highly, highly, highly unlikely, it's possible, but highly unlikely that a native came out of nowhere and started growing up my crepe myrtle. It's more likely that that's one of the invasive exotics because that's the nature of an invasive exotic. It spreads itself around like crazy without human intervention. So therefore, I'm going to err on the side of caution and take it out when I prune that crepe myrtle. So be very, very careful with what plants that you're getting. Here's some bedding plants that make great pollinators. We have this narrow leaf sunflower. That's my narrow leaf sunflower, that picture of. I just bought it again from that local native nursery. A friend of mine has a small nursery. This twin flower, this is a big close-up, but if you saw what it looked like for real, just growing on the ground, you're going to be like, that's a weed. Again, weed or wildflower, you know, kind of. May all of your weeds be wildflowers. That's all I'm going to say. And this wild sage, it's native, and you're looking at it and you're going, oh, that looks pretty lantana-ish. It is. It's in the same family. So that's a good thing as well. Okay, fire spike is this one on the far left. Not a native, but fantastic and plant. Now I've had it in another house, and if we have a hard freeze, it will freeze. But until that point, what's going to come to those red tubular flowers? That's right, the hummingbirds, they're going to find that. Also, any kind of salvia, preferably the native, like this scarlet sage. Butterflies love that. On the bottom, I have the porterweed, and I have put the Latin name, so you make sure you get the native. It's a native despite having Jamaica in its name. It's a native here to Florida, and I was very glad to find out as I was doing this research, because I also got some blue porterweed from my friend with the native nursery, and I was looking at it thinking, oh, I'm not going to tell Rita that this porterweed's kind of laying down. So I was great. Very happy in my research to find out, oh, the native porterweed is sprawling. It doesn't stand upright. It kind of sprawls. So I felt a whole lot better about that. And we were talking about lantana. There's an invasive exotic lantana, the Lantana camara. That's what you don't want to have around. Even though it attracts a lot of butterflies, it's best to have the native. This Lantana depressa is a native lantana. How I remember that is that, you know, don't be depressed because there's a great native lantana that you can have that's going to attract a lot of butterflies. Firecracker plant here, non-native, but Florida friendly. And again, butterflies and hummingbirds are going to love this plant. I just planted some of this in my yard as well. Here's some shrubs. I don't know anyone who ever planted on purpose a palmetto, a scrub palmetto, but they're there, especially here in the Royal Highlands. And I leave a lot of mine. I've taken some ones that are closer to the tiny dog run, just so the bigger wild dogs don't eat them for lunch. But I have two huge stands of scrub palmettos, and oh my gosh, the birds. I think I heard there's like 46 different varieties of birds that live in scrub palmettos, as well as the gopher tortoise likes to hide under there, and, you know, the squirrels, bears. No, bears have not come to my yard, but they do eat the berries. Also, wax myrtle is a nice native shrub that you can train into a small tree. And it has a lot of wildlife value with its berries and just providing shelter as well. Since Simpson's stopper is right here, here's what the berries look like. They make a pretty big shrub, so good for screening. And those berries bring a lot of wildlife as well. Now I have a picture of Yaupon hollies, dwarf Yaupon hollies here, because that happens to be one of my favorites. But any holly, you know, and now is a great time to go out and look for hollies because they are berrying. So you know you're bringing home girls that will berry for you as well. So there's this dwarf Yaupon holly that is naturally shaped like this, so easy to maintain even in a like a formal yard. There's another Yaupon holly that's more like a weeping tree called a weeping Yaupon holly. They're both native. There's lots of native hollies. Mary Nell holly is a native. Buford hollies are not native, but they work great as well. Any kind of holly is going to would be easy to take care of, look good even in a formal yard, and bring a lot of wildlife. Plumbago is on the right of this slide and also right behind me. I'm sitting in front of some plumbago. No, I'm not. It's a picture. It's Zoom magic. But I took the picture behind me yesterday at my dentist office, believe it or not. Plumbago is a nice shrub, and it has blue flowers. So I was listening to an extension agent in Indian River County telling a story of when she was little, she would get in trouble from her teacher for drawing blue flowers because her teacher would tell her there's no such thing. There's plenty of such things as blue flowers, and plumbagos will bring them for you as well. They can grow kind of upright into a shrub, or what's going on behind me is that's a raised bed. So what it's doing, it's kind of spilling over the raised bed, and it looks very attractive there as well. Who knew going to the dentist would get you a great picture of flowers? But you know, that's my life. I take pictures everywhere. Sparkleberry is another native that's going to bring you a lot of pollinators. And believe it or not, this yucca, I mean, they don't bloom until June or so. It's in the century plant family. Adam's needle is a name of one of the yuccas. Also, there's Spanish bayonet and all of that. They actually do attract specific moths and butterflies as well, even without the flowers. Sweet acacia. Be very careful, you know, when you're getting that you don't get it mixed up with a mimosa tree or a white lead tree or anything. Make sure you get it from a native nursery that knows what they're giving you. And this marlberry has these wonderful flowers this time of year as well. And here's, I mentioned the beautyberry before. They are berrying right now. Those really are weeds because they can grow like weeds, but they're fantastic weeds. And you can make them look good in a formal yard as well. You can't kill these beautyberries. They grow extremely well and easily, and the birds love them. Now this firebush. Be careful. I didn't put the Latin name here. You want to get Hamelia patens, HAMELIA PATENS, because that is the Latin variety. There are different fire bushes that are not native. They look just as nice, but they don't have the wildlife value that these natives do. And the zebra longwing butterfly here, our state butterfly, absolutely loves the firebush, but I have seen multitudes of many types of butterflies all over the firebush, and they bloom all year long. It's a great addition to your yard. You can even have some annuals. Now, annuals generally are made, you know, to be pretty to your eye, to be attractive, but there's actually at least these 3 winter annuals that are going to bring you pollinators as well. And that's petunias, zinnias, and calendulas. So if you're thinking of an area where you want to have some annuals, make sure you get these 3 to add to the pollinator population in your yard. So here we'll go over a little bit of what we discussed. Now remember, native plants are going to attract native wildlife. I'm not telling you you have to be 100% native, but the more natives you have, the easier it will be to attract the wildlife. Lawns are not wildlife attractors. Let's just put it that way. They're just not. Limit the use of pesticides to almost nothing if you want to have the wildlife in your yard. Plant diversity is the key. Many different types of plants. To be certified as a Florida-friendly yard, you have to have at least 15 different species of plants. So it's pretty easy to do. So plant different types of plants, different species of plants, but also different sizes and different heights and different shapes. Feed your guests. If you're inviting these critters over, you know, they're part of nature and nature eats nature. So we have to have the insects so that the things that eat the insects come to our yard. And when we're doing that, we have to accept the circle of life. Somebody was once asking in a virtual plant clinic, you know, should I put the bird feeders and all these things in my butterfly garden because they're worried that the birds would eat the butterflies? And that's kind of a hard question. I mean, so don't put it directly in your butterfly garden, but it's all outside, you know, and if we want to have more nature outside, we have to accept the way nature works. So yeah, some birds are going to eat some caterpillars. But if we leave things alone and we stop interfering, then it usually will work itself out. I know if you want to start having caterpillars, we take on this, every caterpillar of mine must make it and must live, but that's not the way it works out in nature. So we have to embrace the circle of life. If you have that tropical milkweed, cut it back. Don't let it grow up again until mid-March. Make a little mess in your yard. Don't rake up all those leaves. Have some brush piles. Have a snag, an old dead tree if you can, if it's safe to do so. Messes in, you know, like I said, go out in the woods. Not everything is neat in the woods, and that's how nature works together. Another thing you can do is, so that this goes on all year long, have things that bloom or berry or, you know, bring provisions each season of the year. You may be like, we're in Florida, we don't have seasons. We do. They just don't smack you in the face like they do up north. But when you've lived here 42 years, like me, you recognize the seasons by the things that are growing and other various subtle little signs like that. And it's not always all about the flowers. Flowers are a very, very important part of a pollinator garden, but they're not the end all. Again, we got to have the shelter. You have to have the food supply. And, you know, green is a color too. That is, I believe that's been attributed to Whitney Elmore from the Pasco County Extension Office. It's important to have that greenery and all the other elements of our pollinator garden. Now, one of my resources where I got the names of those plants so I could see what would attract the pollinators in the winter is this book right here. Oh, you can't see it. Whoa. Well, see, now that's given away. I'm not sitting in front of plumbago for real. There's a picture down there on the slide, a Florida-friendly landscape guide to plant selection and landscape design. So I looked through there and saw what was blooming in the winter and what had a little picture of a bird or a butterfly or a hummingbird. You can get a hold of one of these if you don't have one. You can go to this link above and download it to your computer. Or you can go to the Southwest Florida Water Management District at watermatters.org and order one. Go under residents and resources, and it's on page 2. You can order a book and they'll mail it to you for free. So that's one way to get a hold of that book. Another way is to call the county extension office. Here's their phone number, 352-754-4433. There are a couple of reasons you want to call them. You can call and say, hey, I want to pick up one of those plant books. And Teresa will tell you to come on by, or she will also say, when do you want to come by? I'll take it out to your car if you don't want to come in. But also remember, if you want to know about bees and honeybees in particular, she's the one to talk to as well. So there's her phone number. Or you can go by the Hernando County Master Gardener Nursery. They're open Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8:30 to 11. And they will be glad to give you one of these books. All of the, I keep trying to show it to you, you can't see it. All of these resources are free. So you'll get a free book, and it's a great book to have. Here's some other resources for you. Here's our mama cardinal is back with us again, telling us about these other resources. This website up here, this edis.ifas.ufl.edu, that is the University of Florida's publication website. And here's just a few of the publications you want to look for while you're there. Attracting native bees to your landscape, wildflowers for all seasons, butterfly gardening in Florida, that's a very popular publication, gardening for bees, and hummingbird gardens. That's just a few of the publications by the University of Florida that you'll find on that site, and it'll really get you started. Great resources. Also, go to your Florida Audubon website. You have a very active group here in Hernando County. They're going to be doing the Christmas count soon on Christmas. And see, I don't know birds like these people do. I'm much more concentrated on the plants. I always say one day, maybe when I retire or so, I'm going to start really learning about the birds. Right now, what I know about birds is just what my sisters have taught me or what I've noticed, because of how they interact with the plants. So Florida Audubon's a place to go to learn about birds. Also, the Florida Wildflower Foundation, they have, go to their website. I believe it's flawildflowers.org. And they have all kinds of brochures. There's one I have that I was looking at called Attracting Birds with Florida's Native Wildflowers. And it'll tell you what type of plants attract birds and whether it's the insects or the seeds that attract the birds. So these are just some resources to get you started. Here again is my email, lillyb@hernandocounty.us. So if you'd like a PDF of this or you have any other questions, feel free to email me. Let me stop sharing for now. Wow, there's 22 questions in the chat. So let's see what we have here. Oh, yes, thank you very much. The Native Plant Society. The Florida Native Plant Society website is www.fnps.org. And you can get your county and the site conditions and a list of all of the type of plants to consider. That is very, very helpful. I do a lot of work with the Native Plant Society. So let's see what else we have on the chat. Which were the metallic looking bees. I believe those were actually the sweat bees, I think. I'm not sure, but I believe so. Karen, are you still around? There's a question for you about, can you put fish in a fountain?
Yes. As long as that fountain continues to have water, as long as it doesn't dry out, yes, you can. They're kind of like a goldfish. They're pretty durable. They're pretty hardy. So they will breed in there though. So you probably will have more fish.
Okay.
But it depends, depending on if the babies have places to hide, if they survive it.
Tammy has figured out how to keep the squirrels away from the bird feeders. So everybody contact Tammy if you want to figure out how to do that. If you want to avoid squirrels from dab in a seed feeder, just try safflower seed, not a mix. Never anything with peanuts in it. Squirrels will typically leave safflower alone. Cardinals, finches, nuthatches love it. Even the woodpeckers love it. So there we go. Let's move on down this chat. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. The Carolina chickadee from Marty. She thinks the black cap chickadee is a northern species. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to look it up. Regardless, it's a cute little chickadee. Oh, butterflies have been coming to her hummingbird feeder lately. Well, sure, yeah, the sugars and things that are in there. Let's see, Pinellas County. Pat is asking, if it doesn't freeze there, can you keep your milkweed year round? What I would do, Pat, is call your Pinellas County Extension office. I believe Tia's in Orlando. Sorry. Just call your Pinellas County Extension office and ask them that question. They're going to know a whole lot more about their area than I would. I still would be concerned with that passing that parasite around, though. Deb says she has an abundance of zebra longwings on the passion flower in all stages and phases, still laying eggs, still many caterpillars in all growth sizes, and looking out my window right now, there are 3 coming out of the chrysalis. That's great. Passion vine is wonderful. I just didn't include it in this one because it's going to freeze if we have a freeze. But yes, I'm looking forward to mine really taking off in the spring too. Now I don't know where the Dutchman's pipe is sold. What you would probably have to do is that you can go to that Florida Native Plant Society website that we mentioned earlier and look at what type of Dutchman's pipe vine, what the Latin name is of the native pipe vine, so that you get the right one. They're the ones who are going to be sure that you get the right one. And someone's saying the Hernando County Master Gardeners have some natives. I don't know. I don't think they have that pipe vine, but people in the Native Plant Society will know if it can be found where to find it. You can ask the gardeners because some of them also belong to the Native Plant Society. I know Alice Smith, who sometimes is at the Master Gardener Nursery working. She's also a member of the Native Plant Society, so she might be someone you could ask for and ask about getting the appropriate Dutchman's pipe vine. Yes, and there's all kinds. The Master Gardeners do have natives. They're not exclusively native, but what you have with them are that none of their plants are treated with pesticides. So they have Florida-friendly, non-natives, as well as natives. And if you go to a big box store, you can't be sure that there's not systemic pesticides in those plants. So you want to be very careful if you're attracting wildlife. Is there a native nursery in Pasco County? Well, there used to be. I'm not sure if there is now. The best thing to do is go on that Florida Native Plant Society website and put in your area. Okay, and they'll tell you where the native plant nurseries are close to you. Used to be one in Hudson. I know that one is closed. But I believe there was one closer to Dade City as well. So you'll just have to look that up. Somebody's recommending Wilcox Nursery in Largo. The Florida Friendly, Eric is asking about the Florida Friendly Landscaping Guide. They are working on updating it, Eric. You reminded me, I got an email and they were asking our opinion of what should be in there. So I'll have to look for that email, see if they finished that up yet, or say we'd like to see more natives in there as well. Okay. Yes, everybody check out the Native Plant Society, Florida Native Plant Society. Karen's email, if you need to talk to her, is here on the chat. It's just like mine, but instead of Lillyb, it's kmohica at hernandocounty.us. Okay, yes, there are Native Plant Society club chapters all over in probably every county, so you can find out. Yes, and if you look at the Florida Association of Native Nurseries, fann.org. You can plug in, where is there a native nursery near me? Now you're going to want to call them, because a lot of them are hobby nurseries, or, they're not just retail that are open all the time, and they may have some COVID measures that you need to find out about as well. And this time of year, they're not going to have a lot available. So you need to keep that into consideration as well. Okay, I think we have covered about everything. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. If you have friends who want to watch this, or were not able to get in because they were coming in late or got knocked off or whatever, I am recording this, so I will have it available 2 different ways. As soon as Zoom is done doing its thing in recording it, I will put it up on Facebook. So this afternoon or so, it should be available. I do like to look it over first to make sure none of you, did anything you shouldn't while I was talking that I didn't see. I think Karen was watching you. Also, in a few days, well, with the holiday, it'll probably be next week. It will also be available on Hernando County Government YouTube channel. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you all. And thank you for your input as well, because I certainly don't know everything. And I love when you remind me or teach me too. All right. Thank you, everybody, very much. And we will see you December. When am I coming back? We will see you December 2nd for your Florida-friendly winter landscape. Sort of the same thing, just not concentrated as much on pollinators. It'll be talking about freeze protection and things like that. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you again next week.